Hey guys, welcome to my channel. And in this video, we're going to talk about computer hardware overview and explain the basic computer hardware components. So let's get started. We'll start by covering what is computer hardware, then jump into the main internal hardware components followed by common external hardware components before finishing up with how all of these components work together. Alright, let's go ahead and begin. So first off, let's cover what computer hardware is. Computer hardware refers to all the physical parts of a computer that you can actually touch. It's the actual physical machinery that makes up the computer. For example, the keyboard you use, the mouse you use, the printer you print with, the monitor you look at, even the computer case that you might keep your computer in are all examples of computer hardware. To contrast, anything that isn't physical, like the operating system or applications you run on your computer, are considered software. Let's dive right in and take a look at the main internal components. Now, just as an FYI, some of these components may not be found in all computers, but these are the most common ones. So the first component we'll talk about is the Central Processing Unit, or the CPU. You could think of the CPU as the brain of the computer. This is the part that runs all the code from software applications and other hardware. Everything you do on your computer, whether it's opening an application, viewing a web page, playing a video game, or watching a YouTube video. There's a portion of the CPU that is dedicated to making that happen. These days, CPUs are made by three major manufacturers: Intel, AMD, and Apple for their own Mac line. Regardless of manufacturer, though, they all perform the same general function. And in terms of speed, a higher clock speed means a faster processor. Speed is usually measured in gigahertz, with higher numbers meaning a faster CPU. Additionally, you may also hear something called the number of cores. Cores refer to the number of independent units within the CPU that process the code independently. A core basically allows the CPU to multitask. So a CPU with 4 cores can effectively do 4 things at once. Next up is the random access memory, or RAM. You can think of RAM as the computer's short-term memory. Anytime you open an application or even browse a website, some portion of the site or application will load into the RAM. The RAM holds the data while the computer is actively using it. Having more RAM allows the computer to hold more data in its active memory. And this is useful if you multitask a lot on your computer. As you add more activities, you're using more RAM. So having more RAM available means your computer will be able to keep up with all those activities without slowing down. Our RAM is measured in megabytes or gigabytes. And as a rule of thumb, 16 gigabytes is usually the minimum amount needed for a computer to operate smoothly. Now let's talk about storage drives. Storage drives are essentially where the computer stores its long-term memory. It's where all the files and applications live when they aren't being actively used. Hard disk drives, or HDDs, are a type of storage drive that have moving parts. And while these drives are cheaper and can hold more data, they tend to be slower than solid-state drives, or SSDs. SSDs are a newer type of drive that don't have any moving parts, hence they're faster. Both are great options, but it really depends on your budget and what you plan on doing with your computer. If cost is a concern and you're fine with slower speeds, go with an HDD. But if you want faster speeds, consider an SSD. Storage is typically measured in terabytes, with 1 terabyte equaling 1 trillion bytes, or 1,000 gigabytes. Most computers come with at least 250 gigabytes of storage, but you can get much more if you want. Moving on, let's talk about the motherboard. Think of the motherboard as the main circuit board of the computer. It connects all the hardware components so they can communicate with each other. Without the motherboard, the individual components wouldn't be able to talk to each other and your computer wouldn't work. Pretty much everything in the computer connects back to the motherboard in some way. Next up is the graphics card, or GPU. GPUs are responsible for handling graphics and visual output. In other words, they control what you see on your screen. GPUs are commonly referred to as the visual processor because they process the images, videos, and animations you see on your screen. When you play a video game or watch a movie, the GPU renders all the images and sends them to the monitor, allowing you to see them. Without a GPU, you wouldn't be able to play games, watch movies, or even see your desktop. GPS can vary widely in price based on performance. For example, if you rate just using your computer for general productivity tasks such as word processing or browsing the web, you won't need a powerful GPU. But if you play games or do video editing, you'll need a more powerful GPU. Let's move on and discuss the power supply unit, or the PSU. The PSU is responsible for providing power to the rest of the components. Electricity from the wall goes into the SU, and then the PSU converts that electricity into usable power for the other components. Using a computer requires a lot of energy, and the PSU makes sure the components get the appropriate amount of energy to operate properly. The PSU is measured in watts. The higher the wattage, the more power it can produce. The average computer uses between 300 and 500 watts of power. So a good rule of thumb is to get a PSU that produces more power than you need. And last up on the main internal components is the cooling system. Computers generate a lot of heat, and the cooling system ensures the components don't overheat. The cooling system can consist of fans or liquid cooling and serves to regulate the temperature of the computer. Overheating can damage components, so it's vital for the computer to have a cooling system. Let's now look at some of the most common external hardware components. We'll keep this brief as there are a lot of external components out there, but here are some of the most popular ones. First up is the monitor. The monitor is what you use to see everything you do on your computer. Monitors come in a variety of sizes and resolutions, with larger sizes and higher resolutions providing crisper images. Next up is the keyboard. The keyboard is used for typing letters, numbers, and symbols, and is used to interact with the computer. Some keyboards also have special keys that allow you to perform specific functions. Next, let's talk about the mouse. The mouse is used to control the cursor on the screen and to interact with different elements. There are many types of mice, including wired, wireless, optical, and trackpad. Let's quickly cover a few more. A printer is used for printing documents and images. Speakers are used for listening to audio. A webcam is used for video conferencing. There are plenty of other components out there, but these are just a few of the most popular ones. So now that we've covered all the major components, let's wrap up the video by talking about how all of these components work together. All of these components work together to process and store data. The CPU processes data based on instructions from software. The RAM stores data that the CPU is actively using. The GPU handles visual data to display images on the monitor. The motherboard connects all the components together. The storage drive stores data long-term, and the PSU provides power to the components. The cooling system regulates the temperature of the components. When you interact with the computer, such as clicking the mouse or typing on the keyboard, the data is sent through the motherboard to the appropriate component. For example, when you click the mouse, the data is sent to the motherboard, which then sends it to the GPU, which updates the image on the monitor. Similarly, when you type on the keyboard, the data is sent to the motherboard, which then sends it to the CPU, which then processes it and updates the software accordingly. All of this happens very quickly, allowing the computer to function smoothly. Hopefully this gives you a better understanding of the main hardware components and how they work together. If you enjoyed this video, please leave us a like and consider subscribing. Thanks for watching.